Hickok 45 here. You're looking at some fine revolvers on this beautiful table. Look at this layout. I think I'd take any one of these if they were mine, and they are. So I'll take them. Well, not all of them are mine, but you're moving up on one that is really special. The most special of the firearms on the table. It is not mine. It is the Registered Magnum. Some of you know exactly what that means. Some of you have no clue, and that's my job to clue you in today. But this is a loaded Registered Magnum. I'm going to fire it in a second and talk about it. It is the first .357 Magnum on planet Earth, the Registered Magnum from Smith Wesson. That big old frame revolver that shoots that cartridge we all know and love. Before I fire it, I want to thank the people that help us. Silencer Central, they make those fine Banish suppressors you see here all the time. Appreciate them. And Davidson's Gallery of Guns, you get a guaranteed lifetime replacement on your firearms purchased. Then SDI, the Sonoran Desert Institute, get yourself some great distance learning on a lot of different topics. And then Alabama Holster, great little Kydex concealment holsters. Been using them for a lot of years. And speaking of gallery guns, that's the reason I have this today. Let you know bright and early. Yes, Brad Cantor there owns this. It's his personal firearm, and he lent this to us to shoot and do a video with, and I really appreciate that. So we are very lucky, very fortunate to have the right friends. Let's shoot this thing. Registered Magnum. Let's register it officially by putting one on the paper. Yeah. And then a couple on steel. That should be it. Yes. Now it's registered on the Hickok 45 range, right? 38 special I was firing right there. Since it is a .357 Magnum, you can fire either one, right? You all know that. So it's registered. I've made a lot of jokes about it being registered and about Smith & Wesson being guilty of firearms registration and all that sort of thing. I'll be kind to them today since they came up with this thing, right? So, yep, this is the first time that the cartridge made its appearance in this revolver, the Registered Magnum it's called. All right, I'll tell you why it's called that. And here is a .357 Magnum cartridge. You know what it is. It's a little bit longer than a 38. Here's a 38. You see the difference in the case. Get them lined up there. You all know that. It's just a little bit longer in case. And it's thought that you couldn't put enough powder in the 38 to make it as powerful. Elmer Keith and others have done that. It was lengthened to make sure it didn't end up in 38 special guns, you know, with a really hot load. That wouldn't be good. So you couldn't chamber it in a 38, generally speaking. That was the main reason for the longer cartridge. Okay, so that's it. It's an interesting firearm. It's what we call an end frame, right, today. At the time in 1935, when it came out, it wasn't called the end frame. It was really just based on the 38-44 frame. Smith & Wesson started out with smaller frames, which we call now the K-frame. This is a 38 special, an old one. And this is the K-frame, basically. A lot of firearms are in K-frame. The Model 19's a K-frame. The Model 13 up there, K-frame. When Smith came out with their hand ejector models at the turn of the century, last century, not this, you know, in whatever, 1898, 1900, whatever, it was kind of this frame, 38s, okay? Really handy size. And then when was it? It was, well, they're 44s, and here's a 45, but they came out in what, 1907 or 8 with the triple lock, you know, the hand ejector 44s, and they were like this one. This is a 1917, but essentially the same, you know, size and everything, and the second model hand ejector, I guess. But so they were accustomed to making bigger frames, but they were in like 44s, you know, generally speaking, okay? And then as things progressed in the 20s, you know, we had crazy times in the 20s with Prohibition, and a lot of gangsters running around with their Thompsons and and all kinds of weaponry and hot cars and fast cars. And the police were still, generally packing the old 38 Special, rounds like this and a gun like this, okay? And not the best thing for shooting through car doors or windshields and all that necessarily. And so in, was it 29, I think, they chambered their big frame revolvers like this in 38, still 38 Special, but they added a little power to it. And they were called I think the round was a 38-44, round. It was a 38, but it had more powder, and they cranked it up to about 1,100 feet per second or something. And that was called the 38-44, the heavy duty, and then the outdoorsman, kind of the dressed up model with adjustable sights, I think in 31, okay? So they had been making big frame 38s, all right? Even in the 38-44, where it would take a little more power, it would withstand that, okay? And it would look a little bit like this. This is a Model 20, a different gun, but it would look like this, 38 in frame, and if there was an outdoorsman here and you laid them side by side, you wouldn't necessarily see the difference right away. Kind of like that. Big old frame, in frame, we call it today, chambered 38, right? Okay. And again, because it's an in frame, it's a heavy frame, a 44 frame size, they called it, you could crank that round up a little bit. You didn't have to shoot the anemic 38 Specials that maybe you did in this, okay? Now, that evolved later, Smith & Wesson, and a lot of experimentation by Phil Sharp, Elmer Keith, and others, Doug Wesson at Smith & Wesson. They were convinced they could come up with, for an end frame, a 38, that could handle 14 or 1,500 feet per second. And that's what they did. I think it was Wesson did a lot of the work on that, but Elmer Keith experimenting and Phil Sharp, they came up with the 357 Magnum. They had lengthened the case, and they did a lot of experimentation, and they got that kind of velocity out of it, like 1,500 feet per second, that kind of thing. And they called it the 357 Magnum. Magnum was a large wine bottle, and so they thought that was appropriate. It wasn't really a ballistics or a firearms term, it was wine containers. And so you got then, and they chambered it in this new gun in 1935 called the Registered Magnum. It was literally a Magnum handgun, okay? Looked a lot like, I guess, the Outdoorsman, right? The 38-44, same big frame and same holes in the barrels, 38. But this one, I think they they tempered the steel more, heat treated it on the cylinder for the Magnum case, and that's when they started countersinking the chambers, so the round would fit down in there, and they were concerned about case heads blowing and that sort of thing. That's what I read is the reason they did that, okay? But then they later discovered that wasn't necessary, okay? And Smith has quit doing that. Colt, I think, never did do it for the 357 Magnum. So that's the beginning of 1935, the Registered Magnum. If I misspoke on anything, y'all just correct me. I'm not very smart, but that's kind of all in the ballpark. So 1935, they came out with a 357 Magnum, and before that, the 357 Magnum cartridge and gun firearm did not exist. You're looking at the first, Now this one was made in 37, but I mean, it's, a couple years into it. A 357 Magnum, that's what they looked like. They were all big old end frames for a good period of time. It was a big end frame if you wanted a 357 Magnum. As we speak, you might have a 357 Magnum in your pocket that's smaller than this, right? There's a lot of 357 Magnums around that are not so big now. But these are a collectible item. They're really a premier firearm. They're expensive. Now this one, as you can tell, has wear. It was carried by the New Hampshire State Police, in 1937. They took an order of about 45 or 50 of them, and this is one of them that they purchased. I think it was the year the New Hampshire Police actually started, the State Police started, and they started with these Registered Magnums. So that's what they carried, and this is one of them. So it's been around a while. And, you know, it's not in perfect shape, so Brad shoots it. I've been shooting it some, and it's considered a shooter. Still very valuable. Now, they're called registered Magnum. Let me shoot it again before I yak at you some more. Let's put some Magnums in it. Those were specials, right, I started with. Let's make sure it fires a Magnum. Chambers it and fires it. Oh, yeah. But they were registered. You had to order it, and they just weren't on the shelves. You ordered it through Smith Wesson, filled out a form and all this, what you wanted. You could specify barrel length, anything from like 3.5 inches to, I think, 8 3/4. You could finish nickel or blue. You even were able to designate or specify the point of aim at like 25 yards or something, how you wanted the sight, and then also what kind of sights you wanted. They had a variety of types of sights you could put on it. So it was really a custom gun in a lot of ways. Had a registration number on it right there where you register it. You send the card back in, and it's a registered Magnum, and a serial number as well. But you had to fill out that form and send it in, and there was some concern I read that, I mean, this was considered really a powerful firearm. It's like some laser blaster or something coming out today. 357 Magnum, more power than that anybody really had known in a handgun up to that point, really. And they did, and it was partly to combat the gangs that were running around the country, you know, and robbing banks and everything, the prohibition, all that sort of thing. And the police departments were kind of undergunned, and so Smith and Wesson, you know, and with the folks I mentioned, helped develop this, and they weren't really anxious for the gangsters to get a hold of these necessarily, because the 357 Magnum will penetrate just about anything, right? What do you want to penetrate? Oh man, let's see. Now I haven't shot it a lot with Magnums, especially. I don't want to damage it, that's for sure. But let's put one on this watermelon. All right, registered Magnum. This is for you to celebrate Smith & Wesson's registered. There we go. How about a 2-liter right there? Oh yeah. Maybe we should put one on the gong if I can, if I know where to hold. All right, I heard that ring. Let's put one on the cowboy. Oh boy. Put another one on him. Do I have another one? Did he fire 5 or did he fire 6? He just fired 5. Now he's fired 6. Yeah, registered Magnum. These were, it's hard for us to understand. Even some goofball like me that's really into firearms and revolvers, I can't really fully appreciate what it must have been like in the 30s and when this came out. And not only was it a novel cartridge and new and this unbelievably powerful round and everything, I guess an example, you know, when the 500 Smith & Wesson Magnum came out, in those big old guns, you know, there was some, you know, there was a mystique about that, I guess. It had probably been 10 times that much with this, just considering what was available at the time, and there weren't all these new offerings like we have in our lifetime. But yeah, really special for the time. And again, they're very collectible. I don't know if you can find one of these. I don't know what Brad paid for this one, but they're the cheapest ones I've seen, you know, that's around and doing some research, are like $6,500, and they're up to up to like 20,000, 40,000. One that's new in the box and all that sort of thing. There just aren't that many of them out there in really good shape, and people hang on to them. They're just highly collectible. Like I say, they are definitely the holy grail of Smith & Wesson, and some people would say the holy grail of all handgun collecting. Okay, some things you notice there, like the new Model 27, which it evolved into, of course, is that nice checkering, cross checkering on the barrel, and top of the, you know, top strap and everything. That's pretty cool, isn't it? That's always nice. And again, you could choose your sights. They got some really crazy sights. There's one called the King Reflector sight I saw. It had a red insert and also had a mirror, an actual mirror, you know, built down into there to reflect against the sight. So there's like no expenses spared on these things. The finish was beautiful. Like I said, you could specify just almost everything about it, what you wanted. as long as it fell within, you know, the parameters that they were offering, of course. And one little side note, I didn't, the barrel lengths were from 3.5 to 8 3/4, okay? And I read that at some point there in the 30s, I think they changed the barrel length to 8 3/8 instead of 8 3/4. Why? I've had that same question for 50 years, literally. They changed it because there were some pistol competitions where 8 3/4 was too long. The sight radius was too long for that competition. So to meet the rules of that pistol competition, they reduced the barrel length a little bit there to 8 3/8. And I always wondered that, you know, my first big Smith there, this 8 3/8 barrel, I always thought that's kind of odd. Who decided that sitting around the conference table? Let's make the barrel 8 3/8 inches long. That was the reason. So you learn something if you hang around long enough, don't you? What else we have here? Again, 357. It's you know, they're well made. They're these are original grips, and this one's had some gunsmithing. I think maybe the cylinder by either the New Hampshire police armor or Smith and Wesson might have switched out the cylinder on this one. But yeah, they ordered, I think, they ordered 50, I believe. They got 45, maybe they got 5 later, I don't know. Brad has all the paperwork on it. I was reading through that, what he got from the Smith & Wesson historians on it, the research. And this is as it was shipped, you know, with a 6.5 or 6-inch barrel. So pretty neat knowing where it went. That's hammer design is pretty interesting, isn't it? Isn't that wild? That's the way that's serrated on both sides. That's pretty cool. So a lot of money went into these. And speaking of that, in 39, they did cut some costs. It got too expensive. They were like $60 at the time, but you know, this is during the Depression, and it was expensive to make, and that was the equivalent of about probably $1,500 today, maybe $2,000. So not many people were able to afford this, you know, during the Depression, and but they changed it after 39. It was considered the non-registered Magnum, and they just offered standard barrel lengths and not maybe as many custom features. But they still made, I think, a couple thousand more of them before it was over. They made about 5,000 or 5,500 or something before 39 of the actual registered Magnums, and then some more in 39. And of course, the war, you know, was an interruption, and I think they maybe pieced some more together after that. And then it just evolved into the Model 27. In the 50s, they started using model numbers, and so it became the Model 27 and the 28. That's what this is. The matte finish is the 28, right? You don't have the nice checkering that you have on the 27 or the registered Magnum. You know, cut costs is what's called the highway patrolman, and they you don't need all the fancy stuff, you know, to knock around with it, because it might end up like this, all worn away if a cop carries it around, bangs it around, right? So that's pretty cool. And they, you know, if you've got one of these in immaculate condition, man, what an investment. You might be interested to know that General Patton carried one of these, registered Magnum. Now he later, I think, bought a Model 27. He owned both, or 27, I think. But he had a registered Magnum in 3.5 inch with stag or bone handle or pearl handles, I think, yeah. And they matched his Colt single action. He had a rig where he'd carry one on one side and one on the other, and just pretty neat. Another fact you might be interested in knowing is that some of your favorite movie actors own registered Magnums. Buddies and hunting partners, Clark Gable, I read Clark Gable, Jimmy Stewart, and Gary Cooper all had registered Magnums. You know, makes sense. You know, you had to be a movie actor to afford one, right? So the first one went to J. Edgar Hoover, and it was just a big deal. You know, a big deal when they came out. So it kind of evolved from the you know, like the 29, whatever, along in there, the heavy duty 3844 and the outdoorsman, into the registered Magnum 1935, and then later they became the Model 27. And a lot of people consider that one of the most beautiful firearms ever, you know, the Model 27, because mainly it's one of these, right? Let's shoot the thing again. You want to? All right. So I don't know, there's a lot of stuff about it. You know, share in the comments, some of you folks that are real experts on Smith & Wesson. Maybe you have one. Maybe you won't admit it, but maybe you have one in the bank vault somewhere. You know, they're just beyond cool. The cool factor is just kind of amazing. So let's shoot this thing again. It's the first one I've ever fired. In fact, I guess it's the first one I've ever handled, really. A lot of people have them, or a lot of people who have them just locked up and probably don't shoot them, you know, depending on their condition. Let's go over there again. Let's try a little hunting on that buffalo bison. I think I hit it, but he didn't move. That's 38 special. Let's try that sheep. Maybe he'll fall. Maybe I'm not even hitting it. Let me try the gong. Maybe I was missing. I got another bullet. Let's put it on this bowling pin right here close. Yeah. So this is pretty cool. We really appreciate Davidson Gallery Guns and Brad lending this to us. Let's, you know what we haven't done? We've got to smoke some pot. Okay. Got to smoke some pot with Magnums since we have this registered Magnum. Yeah, nice thing. So there's not a lot of them out there, you know, between what, 6,000-7,000 of them even out there. And anybody that has one that's in like really good shape probably just doesn't fire it, would be my guess. Let's smoke a little pot. This gun deserves it. Yeah. Yeah, deserves to do some bowling too. I think I have another one. Sorry, cowboy, you get beat up again. Yeah. All right, let me lay it down, let you get a look at it again, and let me try to remember if there's anything else that I know you would be dying to know about it. Maybe, well, there's probably not a lot of you alive when this came out, right? You're probably not sitting around watching YouTube videos with about idiots like me, or done by idiots like me, if you are alive. One thing that was interesting too, you know, everybody's a marketer. Doug Wesson, who was what, grandson of Daniel Wesson, I guess. He, who was, you know, obviously kind of developed it, he, and then of course the experimentation of Elmer Keith and Phil Sharp and others. But he would travel around and hunt with it when they came out with it to help promote it, you know, largely, but he was a shooter. And he took a lot of game with 357 Magnum that hadn't been taken much, maybe with a handgun, elk, antelope, big game, moose with the 357, with this gun. He also took a grizzly bear up in Canada, I read. And so that all made for great publicity. So you can about imagine everybody was just, you know, gaga over the gun and the cartridge at that time. So just it's an interesting story, you know, about Smith & Wesson and just the evolution of firearms. And you know, we all enjoy these kinds of firearms, I think, if you're a shooter, whether it's a K-frame, a smaller one, or these bigger frame firearms, and chambered in 44 or 357, 38, they're just all fun to shoot. I brought out the Model 19 again just to emphasize how the 30 and 35, you know, this was the only 357 Magnum. There were no 357 Magnums of small frames really for a long time, till Bill Jordan and crew talked Smith & Wesson into coming out with the 357 Magnum in a K-frame, you know, the Model 19 or a Combat Magnum or whatever, you know, in the 50s. So this is a new thing right here, okay? So this is now a handier 357 Magnum, right? And of course, here's one smaller with a round butt, you know, the FBI gun, my Model 13 that I really like, short barrel, round butt, 357 Magnum, all the same power, you know, but in a smaller package. So we tend to prefer a smaller package for a 357 Magnum these days, but not in 1935. So I'll shut up, and I thought you might need to know about the Registered Magnum if you didn't know. And I was a little vague on it. I didn't know why it was called a Registered Magnum until recent years. I just thought, well, you know, gun companies name guns, strange names, who knows what that's about. Well, now I kind of know what it's about. You know, you had to order it and register it and everything. They call it the Registered Magnum. So that's what it is. And that's the story, and I'm sticking to it. Life is good.
Oh yeah, that's better. This is a great gun for defense. Oh hey, didn't see you guys there. While I've got you here, I want to remind you of our friends over at Talon Grips and Ballistol. Talon Grips makes grips, can you believe it, for all different types of firearms. You can get rough texture or more of a rubberized texture. It just sticks right on there. You know, really affordable, really cool option to improve the grip for your handguns or rifles. So please check them out at talongungrips.com. You'll be glad you did. And also Ballistol. Dad has been using Ballistol for many years. It's a cleaner and a lubricant, and it's non-toxic. It works really great, and we're happy to have them on board since it's been a part of our shooting endeavor for a very long time. So go to ballistol.com, talongungrips.com. And also, while you're out there, I'm juggling all these things here. Also, while you're on the internet, please do check out our other social media like Hickok45 on Facebook. There's also Hickok45 on Twitter, The Real Hickok45 on Instagram. There's a John_Hickok45 on Instagram where I do some things. There's Hickok45.com. You can find us also on Gunstreamer. So check out all that stuff and then watch more videos.